The client-side validation that we've added shows up when we submit a form. So if we go ahead and submit, then we find out, oh, that we need to fill it in, that's required. Or when we type this in, or we do a phone number incorrectly, we don't find out until we submit it. And then we just find them out one at a time. And then have to click submit till we find out what the next one is. And then we find out the next one. So it requires a submit per each one. And it works, but that can be frustrating for a user that they don't get to know until after they've added everything. So we can use style to give feedback sooner about whether something is correct or not. And to do that, we're going to use pseudo classes. Now, if we go on W3 Schools and we scroll down to find out what kind of pseudo classes we can use, the ones that we're going to use are focus, and that will identify an input when it's been clicked on, when it's under focus. And just one of the input elements will be under focus at one time. So we're going to use focus, and then we're going to use the invalid and the valid classes, pseudo classes. And they identify whether an input element is valid or invalid, the current value in there. And it's very responsive. It knows right away whether it's currently valid or not. So to add this style, we're going to go to the rb_forms.css file, and we're going to do an input element, and we're going to talk to them about using the ID. So we're going to do name, and then we're going to say if it's on focus. So here we use the focus pseudo class, and then we're going to use valid. So look how we combine one right after another. So we said this is an input element with ID set to name. It currently has focus, and the current value is valid. And that's the selector to select that particular element. And we're going to change the background. And we're going to use the combined background property where we can put a whole bunch of different things, right? So we can put the color, RGB, and say it is 220, 255, 220. So that's the color, the background color. And then we'll do an image, a URL image. And now we're in the styles folder. So we have to go up a folder before we can get into the images one. So we do // to go up a folder. Then we select the images folder. And then inside there, we want the RB_valid. All right, the next thing that we're going to put is the position. So we want this to be bottom and right. And then the size, and the size that we want is contain, and that will simply adapt the size of the image, so it's fully contained in all the directions. And then no repeat. We only want to show it once, so we're going to do no repeat. All right, and that's the whole style rule, is that background style rule. Okay, so let's go look at this input element with ID set to name. So there's input element set to name. It's not valid yet, right? Because it doesn't have anything in it. So as soon as we enter something, it becomes valid. And we get that background color. There's that image right there in the right, and it's fully contained so we see it. So now we know right away that it's right. Notice how it goes away when it's not under focus, because focus is part of it, right? So it has to be focus and valid before that style is applied. Now let's go ahead and add this same style to some other elements. So these are still going to be an input element, but now this one's going to have an ID zip, and then it'll still be focus and valid. And then another comma, because we want to do another one. So input and ID, let's do the phone, focus, and valid. Okay, one more. Input, ID mail, focus, and valid. Okay, now we save it. We go back and refresh. And what we've done is we've added it to all of them. So our name is still there. It tells us as soon as we enter something that's valid. What about the zip code? Okay, it's valid when it's empty. Let's see if we can add more. Nope, not valid when you just have a 2. There, you got to get up to 5 before it's valid. Then you add a hyphen. it's not valid anymore, and it stays not valid clear till we get the additional 4. So either 9 digits or 5. And the phone number, same thing. Yep, we get too many in there, it's not valid. We get too few, it's not valid. And email the same. Notice how we're getting this feedback before we even start, right? Oh, our mail isn't working because that's an invalid mail. Let's see what happened with mail. Input mail, focus, and valid. Oh, it's for valid, and we haven't got valid yet. So it stayed invalid. No, that's right then. So it's not valid till we have an @ sign and something after it, and then it becomes valid. So now that set it for all those valid times. We want to do something too for invalid. So I'm going to do it to exactly the same input element. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it down here. And then I'm going to change this to invalid. So just like that. So instead of, it's still going to be when it's on focus, still use the ID and the input element, but now it's going to be when it's invalid. And now we can set the red to 255, the green to 232, and the blue to 233. And the image we want to change, we don't want to use the valid one, but there's an image there that is invalid, RB_invalid. We want to use that one. We want it to be in the same location and the same size and the same no repeat. Okay, now we go back and refresh. Now what happens? Now, as soon as we focus on the name, it shows up invalid because empty is not valid in this case. As soon as we enter something, it changes to valid. So there we're giving feedback right away. Postal code, empty's fine. As soon as we enter a number, it becomes invalid. So this is one disadvantage. A user might say, wait a minute, give me a chance to make it valid, but they just have to keep going and it becomes valid. And the same with the phone number. It starts out valid when it's empty, not when it has a digit. And too many makes it valid, invalid, but you have to keep going until you get the right number, and then it's valid. Same with email, it's invalid. This one's required, so it's invalid right away. It's still invalid until we get an @ sign followed by a letter, and then it becomes valid. So that's a way to use style to give feedback to users quickly about whether what they're entering is valid or not.